Okay, I wasn't nervous until I see this thing here. This is this is something new. No, I'm okay. Well, happy Mother's Day. I was told by Joe Steffer that if you have over 4 kids, you get 2 days. So not only do I get today, but I get tomorrow as well. So I deserve 2 days. Did everyone like the video? It was great, wasn't it? Today we're going to hear a little bit about leaving a legacy versus leaving an inheritance, and just the difference between the two of them. And a couple weeks ago, we met with a family, and we had given them a homework assignment to ask their children what they see that they most value in their parents. And then even with one another, with the spouses, we asked, the husband, what do you think your wife values? And we asked the wife, what do you think that your husband values? Because the truth of the matter is, what you do with your time is what you value. Sometimes our actions don't necessarily follow what we want. We don't know necessarily how to get there, and a lot of that getting there to do what we most value takes removing some things off our plates. And, we don't want to do that. We want to keep everything on our plate and keep what we value as well. But, a lot of times there's like an expectancy that everyone else can remove. They can remove all this stuff off their plate, just don't ask me to remove things off my plate. So, but regardless, as you live your life with seasons and changes, you're going to be continually moving things around, taking things on and off your plate, but your values of who you are or who you want your family to be, when you lay them before the Lord, they're pretty set in stone, and you're going to do exactly what you set out to do with your time and with your energy and with your actions, with what you value. So I like to give out homework assignments. That's always a lot of fun to give them out. But when you have to take them back in and say, what, I'm going to do this homework assignment with my children. It was really scary to lay that out there. And I said, type them up, swish, swash. I'm not going to try to recognize anybody's handwriting. I want you guys to write down what you think that I love to do, what you think that I value. And so I asked all of my children to do this, and I promised I wasn't going to get angry and I wasn't going to fudge anything. And so that's what I did. Now, I'm not going to bore you. We have, how many kids? 8 children. So I'm not going to bore you with my top 3 values in all of my 8 children, because that would be 24 values, and I surely not going to do that to you. But we're going to play a little bit of a game, a little bit of Family Feud, and I'm going to need some crowd calling, and that's all okay. You guys are a little bit quiet this morning, so I'm asking you, and if you know me or you don't know me, that's okay. I'm asking you, what do you think my kids say that I value? What do you guys say that Miss Val values? So, who will be our first? I have candy. I don't come up here without bearing gifts. So who wants to take a first stab? I won't be offended, I promise. Keith, what do you say my kids say that I most value? Okay. Good answer. Very good. Now you guys know how Family Feud is played. We say, survey says. But today, we're going to say, we asked my son Strider. He is 3 years old. So what does Strider say? Doing my nails. Good job. Who wants to go run Mr. Keith a lollipop? I got chocolate. All right, who wants to be the second one? Second one. Whoop. Yes. A Christ-centered house. Yeah, that was on my list of 24. But what does Strider say I value? Going to church. All right, next one. Who's next? Rachel. A good cup of tea. Is she right? Let's see what Strider says. Kissing Daddy. Okay, last one, because there's only 4. Who's next? Yes, you right there. Do I value my children? Let's see what Strider says. Number 4, eating chips. All right. So I dare all you moms and dads to ask your children what they think you value. They're very honest. But I've learned that it's never too late, never ever too late, to live out what God calls you to value and to start laying your legacy down today and now. At the age of 22, I was a very young mom. I already had 3 children and my 4th one on the way. And at that time in my life, I definitely thought there's always tomorrow, that, in 5 years I'll do this, and in 3 years I'll live out what really matters. But I think I thought that way because my vision was so limited. I could only see today and what I had in front of me today, dirty diapers and spit up and dinners and all that sorts of stuff. But I never really thought that what I did today has lasting effects for tomorrow. And I had to come face to face pretty quickly because our family was growing rather quickly and say, the values that I had at 22, I'm going to share them with you, they've got to change. They've got to change because they're going to just be a mere inheritance and not a legacy. So these were some of the things that I valued when I was 22. Number 1, I'm clean. Number 2, my house is clean. And number 3, by golly, my kids are clean. So neatness and organization and order and the infamous schedule that never gets moved was very, very, very valuable and important to me. But it was for me, it was a chasing after the wind. It didn't really have any great substance to it. So I definitely had to change because I didn't want to be remembered as she's the one who has it all together. That's nice, but I don't know how far past that would live beyond me, was that I had it all together. And the truth of the matter is I really didn't have it all together, but I sure gave the look that I had it all together. The difference between an inheritance and a legacy. An inheritance could be a piece of property, a special possession, a sum of money, a family tradition, but a legacy lives past me and you. It's a treasure that moth and rust cannot decay. A legacy has passion, adventure. It's a story to tell and a life to emulate. A legacy is something that has happened in the past and is now being transmitted or received by an ancestor. What better way to transmit that? What better way to transmit that, to live a life out to the fullest? What better thing that we can leave our kids than to have life? In my Maxwell Leadership Bible, it says, your lasting value will be measured by succession. What you value comes out today, and your successors will carry them out tomorrow. Let's pray. God, I thank you so much for this day and just for this opportunity and privilege to bring forth your word, Lord. And I just pray that our moms are blessed. I pray that all of us, Lord, would be challenged and changed, knowing full well that today we can start to live out our legacy, no matter what our yesterday looked like. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, the first place I looked when I was considering legacy was Jesus Christ. His legacy has been around for over 2,000 years, and many of us are carrying it out and living it out today. But when I tried to narrow down his legacy, to most of us it's inviting, but for the most part, his legacy is come, die, now go, which isn't always an inviting task. We know that we read all those scriptures, pick up your cross and follow me, and leave your father, mother, brother, and sister, and follow me. And it's true. I can't really get away from Jesus' legacy being come, die, come to me, die to self, now go. And so often I hear that. What does he want me to do? What is his will for my life? I hear it from you, but I also say it to myself. And the truth is, I do know his will for my life. I just don't necessarily want to come die or go. So in Matthew 28:19, it says, this is Jesus' legacy, "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." There it is, the legacy of Christ. Lay down your rights and lay down your life. I'm going to apply today this come, die, and go legacy with a very unlikely woman in the Bible to show you how all of us, too, can live this out and keep the legacy of Christ and the torch going from one generation to the next. Jesus had a hope that all men would come to know him as Savior, but there was no guarantee that all men would. He still came and he still died. That was how he put his hope and faith in his Father without knowing the end result. He put action into his hope by coming and dying. The same is asked of us today. Will we, by faith, come and die? In Hebrews 11:1, faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. James 2:25 says, "Faith without works is dead." I think of those seeds that you plant them, you put work into them, and there's a hope that come next spring or summer, or maybe by this fall, they're going to grow and you guys are going to see a sunflower. All legacies start with a by faith attitude. Being faithful to live out today what others will hopefully carry out tomorrow. But there's no guarantee that your footsteps are going to be followed by everyone. But God calls us to be faithful with one who will then go multiply themselves to another one. And that's how we grow this legacy. We're going to spend this morning looking at a very unusual woman on Mother's Day. Her story is one of danger, mystery, adventure, grace, and faith. I have found her to be a perfect picture of salvation and deliverance. She's also a perfect picture of lost people matter to God and he wants them found. But it doesn't end there. Lost people matter to her and she wants them found. Her legacy is not just mentioned in one book, but it's mentioned in 4. We find her story in Joshua, Matthew, Hebrews, and in James. Now, I don't know if I'll be able to top my husband's sermon from about 4 years ago of "Sit down, pretty princess." But today we're going to look into Rahab the harlot and see how we all have a little Rahab in all of us. Just a quick history before we turn to Joshua chapter 2. Just a little quick history. If you're like, hundreds of years have gone by to get us to the book of Joshua. In Genesis 15, there was a promise made to Abraham. God brings him out and says, "This land you will inherit, and your descendants will be as numerous as stars in the sky." Abraham never sees that promise take place, but he begins to live out his legacy even then by faith that the Israelites would have this promised land one day. Well, one day turned into over 400 years. Moses comes along and picks up the torch, and he delivers the Israelites out of the hands of slavery. They leave Egypt, and they all think they're going to enter the promised land that was promised to them, and no, doesn't happen. They're in the desert for 40 more years that they're in the desert. But God is so awesome. He always reserves a remnant of people despite not only the Israelites' disobedience, but even our disobedience. Now, Moses never enters the promised land. His successor is Joshua. Now, Joshua is going to be the one that leads the people into the promised land. Now, there's a city that has to be taken, and that's in Jericho, and we're going to hear about that in a second in Joshua chapter 2. The Jordan River has to be crossed, and Jericho has to be taken. But Jericho is inhabited by the Canaanites, and it's a walled city. It's a fortified city. There's 30 feet walls, and the Canaanites, for the most part, pretty much think they are top dogs. They've got these secure walls all around them. But in the back of their head, they know all the way back from Genesis and what their ancestors have told them that God's judgment is coming. It's coming, and his promised possession, his people, are going to eventually take this land. So like I said, Jericho is beautiful. It's got springs of water, it's flowers, it's plentiful harvest, fortified walls. It's inhabited by the Canaanites. Now, the Canaanites, back in Genesis chapter 9, you'll see their legacy begin. And the Canaanites are descendants of Noah, and Noah's son Ham had Canaan. And in Genesis 9, there's a situation where the Ham and Canaan mock Noah, and Noah curses them, curses Canaan and the Canaanite people. So the Canaanites are idolaters. They're worshipers of Baal and his wife. They worship promiscuity. They worship prostitution. Their hearts are very hardened toward God. So these are the people that we're going to be learning about that live in Jericho. But God pursued them for over 400 years. God had been pursuing them in his only godlike ways, whether it be prophets or famines or wars. God had been pursuing them. But they would not turn from their ways, and they would not turn back to God. But they knew, like I said, from the ancestors in the past, that judgment was coming. See, in just this little quick history, there's legacies upon legacies of Moses to Joshua and Abraham to Isaac and Jacob. But today we're going to zero in on Rahab. Turn your Bibles with me to Joshua chapter 2, and let's read verse 1 through 7. If you don't have your Bible, it should be there. Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. Go look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab, bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out our whole land. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. She said, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, the men left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly. You may catch up with them. But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax she had laid out on the floor. So the men went out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan, and as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Now, Rahab. Rahab was not an Israelite. She was a Canaanite. And she was not just a prostitute. She was a harlot. A little bit of a difference there. A harlot was an owner of prostitutes. So maybe she was once a prostitute and came up the lines, and now suddenly she's an owner of prostitutes. She's an innkeeper, most likely of a brothel. She sold and dyed linen, as well as owning an inn. She was quite wealthy. Her place of establishment was built in the city walls, right near the gate. So that gave her the opportunity to hear a lot of the news of the land from all the guests that stayed with her. She heard a lot of the goings and the comings of what was happening. To say the least, she was pretty well-rounded in many traits. And for being a lady, she was pretty street smart. But I found it so ironic in verse, in one of the verses, that the king called her and knew her. And although she was the lowest class of citizen in society, the king of Jericho calls for her and knows her. Yes, she is a harlot. Yes, she is a liar. And yes, she is a sinner. When I say the words idolaters and adulterers, when I describe the Canaanite people, I think for many of us, we're like, oh, that's not me, not I. But when you consider the definition of lust, that is, I want that, and I want that now. We too can be like Rahab. I think Rahab, her lust was really financial gain and money. You know, she was a pretty wealthy lady, like I said. But we too can worship just about anything or anyone. Food, weight, a bigger home, a marriage, a job, having children, not having children, having a husband, not having a husband, retirement, people. We too are always faced with someone or something competing for the throne of our hearts. So you see, we all too have a little Rahab in all of us. But despite our current condition, just like the king called her and knows her, our king calls for us and knows us by name, and he calls us his beloved and his prized possession. So the spies end up in chapter 2, verse 1 through 7, the spies end up at Rahab's. Why are these spies going to Rahab's? Why? Couldn't they stay anywhere else? Well, like I said, harlots were innkeepers, and if you didn't have family in the town of Jericho, well, then you needed someplace to stay. So most foreigners would stay at the inns that were provided for them. But I think even more closely than that, if you're a really good, clever spy, are you going to go where the locals go? Where are you going to go as a clever spy? And so it's not really that off the wall to think that the spies would end up in the city wall at Rahab's, because that's how good spies function. I'm just amazed by how God puts the story of Rahab right before the heat of a series of battles for them to get into the promised land. Rahab, I definitely was like, oh, these are one of these things I just want to skip over, one of those verses or one of those stories, she's, not really great to talk about, but I think God is so amazing because lost people matter to him, and he wants them found. And before the heat of this series of battles, Rahab enters the scene. Now, Rahab, in just even speaking to these spies, has committed high treason. And not only does she lie to the pursuers, but she lies to her king. Oh, yeah, I met them, but they're not here anymore. I don't really know where they came from. Again, I'm amazed by our God that puts this liar into his Bible to be displayed, and then later on calls her a hero of the faith. Why? Because he's God, and we all have a little Rahab in all of us. Let's read on. Joshua chapter 2, verses 8 through 14. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given this land to you, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea. For when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard it, our hearts melted, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show your kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death. Our lives for your lives, the men assured her. If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us this land. Rahab describes the condition of her people, the Canaanites. Like I said, these Canaanites, they preferred to live in fear and faint-heartedness than to be free. But Rahab gets saved. If you haven't picked it up in these verses, she proclaims, your Lord did this, and your Lord did that. And he is the one true God above heaven and on earth. He defeated the Amorites. He parted the Red Sea. Salvation showed up on Rahab's doorstep. And God used the spies for this to be enlightened. She already believed, and she already received Israel's God for her own. And then what does she do? She cuts a deal to be spared. How true of us. We believe, we received, and we're spared from eternity in hell when Jesus comes in. But Rahab doesn't stop there. She's not content that salvation has visited her. She recognizes that her family needs salvation and deliverance too. Why? Because lost people mattered to Rahab. Do they matter to you? Let's finish our story. Joshua chapter 2, verses 15 through 24. So she let them down by a rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. Now she had said to them, go to the hills, so the pursuers will not find you. Hide yourselves there 3 days until they return, and then be on your way. The men said to her, this oath you have made us swear will not be binding on us, unless when we enter the land you have tied this scarlet cord in the window through which you will let us down. And unless you have brought your father and mother and brothers and all your family into this house. If anyone goes outside your house into the street, his blood will be on his own head. We will not be responsible. As for anyone who is in this house with you, his blood will be on our head if a hand is laid on them. But if I tell you what we are doing, we will be released from the oath you made us swear." "Agreed," she replied. "Let it be as you say." So she sent them away, and they departed. She tied the scarlet cord in the window. When they left, they went into the hills and stayed there for 3 days, until the pursuers had searched all along the road and returned without finding them. Then the 2 men started back. They went down out of the hills, forded the river, and came to Joshua, son of Nun, and told him everything that had happened. They said to Joshua, "The Lord has surely given us the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us." So Rahab cleverly cuts a deal. She says, "Spare me, I won't tattle on you, and you guys spare me, and I'll bring my whole household in." And, there's a pact that's made. There's oath of secrecy and oath to be spared. The cord that she uses to send them out over the city gates so that they can escape, she leaves out so that later on they know what to do or what not to do. She gives these spies a plan of escape. I mean, who is this lady giving these spies a plan of escape? But she does, and there's like a trust and a bond. She keeps that scarlet cord outside her window as a sign so that when the Israelites come to conquer it, that her house would be passed over. Kind of reminds you of what took place in the Exodus. The Israelites would know to pass over her house in a few weeks when they come to siege to take Jericho. Just a real quick rest of the story, moving out throughout Joshua into Joshua chapter 6. So this takes place between her and the spies. Quick rest of the story. The Israelites are getting ready for battle. They're getting ready to storm Jericho. Many of you guys know the little Bible story of Joshua and the walls of Jericho come tumbling down. So Joshua gives these commands about how they're going to take Jericho. He tells them, for the next 7 days, we're going to march around this city. We're going to do it once for 6 days, and then on the 7th day, we're going to march around the city of Jericho 7 times. And then the Levites, they're going to blow trumpets, and the Lord is going to deliver us. Now, I don't know if that sounds crazy to all of you. It sounds crazy to me, and it definitely had to sound crazy to Rahab. So here she is. Now, once again, this doesn't always happen right away. The pursuers hide for 3 days. Who knows when the Israelites are coming? Who knows when she's going to be delivered? She just has that scarlet cord hanging outside her window to say, "Don't forget me." So, sure enough, I can imagine Rahab sitting outside her window and looking and watching these crazy Israelites march around her city, and this is who she's entrusted, her life and her household to. But she does. Rahab remains because I believe her trust and her faith was in God. And sure enough, in 7 days, just like Joshua said, just like what was done, the walls of Jericho came tumbling down. The Levites blew their horn, and there they came, and Jericho was overtaken by the Israelites. And not only was it overtaken, but the directions were to burn the city of Jericho to the ground. So pretty intense. The day of judgment had come. Throughout all of history, you always see what God does with a remnant. And here, the only person that was spared in the city of Jericho was Rahab and her household. A remnant was spared, and God does so much with a remnant of people who have just a remnant of faith. I'm amazed again, like I said with Rahab, how she watched these crazy loons march around her city, how she entrusted her household to spies. Like I said, she must have second-guessed herself, but she remains, by faith, to live. Once again, faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. Rahab came to God. She died to self by renouncing her people and risked her life to save many. And she went on to rewrite the legacy of her life on that day when salvation visited her and when the spies knocked on her door. Now I ask you, doesn't knowing that we all have a little Rahab in all of us sound a little bit more appealing? Now, I'm not saying, ladies, to go commit high treason against your spouses. I am not saying to hide your children's wrongs from people. I'm not even saying to cut deals with your spouses. That is sin. And Rahab is, in the same way, Rahab is a sinner by birth. She's a sinner by profession. And she's a sinner by her lies. She is really, really, really messed up. But so am I. And so are most of us here. But her confession in God allows her to be delivered from her ways, and her faith in God shows in her future actions. Like I said, Rahab and her family were spared that day. And as you search her story out, you see that she goes on to marry an Israelite, and his name is Salmon. Now, he's from the line of Judah. His great-great-grandpa was Perez and Tamar. You can read all about them. You can find her husband's story in 1 Chronicles chapter 2. Most likely, Salmon was one of those spies that Rahab hid. Rahab turns from her ways. She's grafted in as an Israelite. And Rahab ends up in the genealogy of Jesus Christ in Matthew chapter 1. So often we hear about genealogies being so boring, and let's just skip over them. I encourage you to read Matthew chapter 1 and do a backtrack on some of these legacies of some of the people that are in the line of Jesus. David and Rahab and Tamar. They will bring you to tears because you see how, my gosh, this one should have been annihilated. And you scratch your head and say, how did this one make it into the genealogy of Christ? Well, Rahab's in there. Rahab the harlot makes it into the genealogy of Jesus Christ. And like I said, how crazy it is. What a crazy combination. Rahab the Canaanite marries Salmon the Israelite. Rahab and Salmon go on to have Boaz. Boaz marries Ruth. Everybody knows the book of Ruth. Ruth the Moabitess. Just another, this is a crazy combination. I don't know how to say. That's apples and oranges. Just the crazy combination of these two coming together. Boaz has Obed. Obed goes on to have Jesse, and Jesse has David, and all down the line, Jesus Christ ends up in the genealogy of Rahab. But you know what's even crazier? Holy, righteous God desiring to be one with me and you. I think that's even a crazier combination than a race of people. What a legacy Rahab leaves us. What a legacy that when we, by faith, come to God, die to self, and now go, that her actions by that faith are spurred. Rahab sides with God, she sides with his people, and she sides with his ways. No greater legacy to give those around you than a real faith in Jesus Christ. And he may call you to do some pretty crazy things that don't always make sense. He often breaks the mold of the possible and the make sense in Rahab's life, but also in ours. When I think about faith being sure of what I hope for and certain of what I do not see, to be honest, there isn't much faith, grace, mystery, danger, or adventure in the possible and the make sense way of living. And there surely isn't as much dying to self in the possible and in the make sense. Our faith in Christ should spur us onward to go and make disciples in my home with my children, in my church with you, and in my world. But the temptation to give up at any one of these crossroads is always lurking. In the coming to him, there's the temptation of, let me just get good enough. Let me just make myself a little bit more lovely before he receives me. Not true. Some of us get tripped up in the dying to self. We say, it is just too much to die to self. Some of us get tripped up in the going. We say that we don't know enough. Some of us get tripped up in the siding with God. Like I said before, Rahab sided with God, she sided with his people, and she sided with his ways. We get tripped up in the siding with God that God wouldn't ask us to do that. We get tripped up in siding with his people. We say, they're imperfect and they can't be trusted. We can get tripped up in siding with his ways.
we say that the Bible is too big to ever retain all of knowing God. But the greatest one, without the coming to me, coming to Christ, all of this really, doesn't make sense. To say no to one of those areas, to say no to the coming to Christ, you really say no to all of them. And in the end, you say no to Jesus. To be honest, dying to self would be my greatest temptation of where I get faced with saying no. A few weeks ago, I was having one of those just another days in paradise. No dinner was made. The baseball team was coming. Kids needed to be picked up. I hadn't showered. And it's 3:15, and the phone rings, and it's Ariana. And she says, practice is done early, and she gives this message to Annalise. And I'm actually in my mom's bathroom, doing number one, because that's all that moms do. And Ariana's like, I'm done with practice early, and can you bring my friend Tiff home? And I hear Annalise on the phone be like, sure! And I'm like sitting there like, it's 3:15, I can't take Tiff home. Tiff is a girl that she runs with on her track team, and she lives clear across Jackson. She lives all the way by the ShopRite. And I'm thinking, how is this all going to happen? And I look in the mirror, and I say, my life is not my own. My life is not my own. And quickly I was like, that's a Bible verse. That is a Bible verse. 1 Corinthians 6:19-20 says that I do not belong to me, that I was bought at a high price. And God said, you are absolutely right, Valerie. Your life is not your own. It belongs to me. How funny. Just like my life, his life, belonged to my Father and was laid down for you. Death to self is a big part of the inner workings of having faith. The work of death to self will either make or break your growth in faith. Like I said, the legacy of my faith spurs me to come, die, and go, make disciples that do the same. My first disciples being my children. They're watching me and they're asking, will my mom go? But the same is true of you. Will my leader go? Will they go there? Will they go here, there, and everywhere? Do they really believe what they proclaim? And for you kids, if your mom or dad isn't living by this legacy of faith, the same question goes out to you, kids. Will you go? Do you believe what you proclaim? Or is this just playing church or playing house? If I was to think about my life 5 years ago, and if I was to ask my kids these questions, do you think mommy would go here, there, and everywhere? I think they would say she believes in the impossible. She believes God wants all men to know him and be saved and be changed. But I don't necessarily know if she would take a role in that. I think today they would say something different. And a lot of them shared that, like I said, in their 24 values of mom. Pretty amazing how my kids see me. Very humbling. So at the end of this story of going to get Tiff, we did. We went, we got Tiff. All was right in the Nash world. I might have not had a shower. Dinner was served. Baseball team came, entertained moms, did all that, and it was a great time. Because who knows? By faith, we're believing that not only Tiffany and Ariana's track team will come to know Christ, but Olivia and Alex will come to know Christ as well. By faith, we go. And who knows where these girls are going to school? All of them are getting full rides here, there, and everywhere. And so if they believe, and then they take to the gospel to their college in Connecticut or Rhode Island or wherever they're going, who knows? Rahab, in this new proclamation of God, being the one true God, put her belief in action by laying her life down so many generations could be spared and survive. John 12:24 says, I tell you the truth, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. The man who loves his life will lose it, while the man who hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, my servant also will be. My Father will honor the one who serves me. Unless we die to self, it's impossible to multiply ourselves. We can claim, I want my kids to do this, I want my ministry team to do that. But you must be the first one to live out a real faith in Christ that causes you to spring into action. Now, motherhood is a great place to start this dying to self, like Jennifer shared this morning. But don't wait to have kids to be a follower of Christ. But as moms, the moment you become pregnant, you do start to think beyond you. Suddenly, don't do that, don't do this, do this, don't do this, don't do that. Very quickly, the understanding of you now becomes two. And 24/7 discipleship begins the day you find out that you're having a baby. And it doesn't end. You die to yourself, your wants, your needs, that last piece of pie, as he always gets. Those new running shoes on Ariana's feet. Well, I have to shop at thrift stores these days. Late nights of projects and baking, early rising to run them here, there, and everywhere. And then it doesn't stop. Then sometimes as a mom and dad, you have to take the back seat and let somebody else come alongside them and disciple them. So there's a lot of dying to self in motherhood. It's a great place also, though, to be tempted to think, why not to come and die? Motherhood is a great place that you're tempted to think of all the reasons why not to come and die and go, side with God, his people, and his ways. You often think, like, what if Junior resents me or thinks I'm too strict? What if I'm not their friend? All those what ifs stop you from living by faith. All those what ifs stop you from living a legacy. True love is doing what's right for the one you love. Doing what's right for the one you love. I often think of immunizations. You do the right thing for the one you love, even though it's painful right there and then at the time that they get 4 or 5 shots shot into their arms and legs. In the beginning, you remember the quote that I shared, your legacy will be measured by your successors. Despite our yesterdays and our past, God says today, lead them in what you value and believe. Live out a faith that sides with God, sides with his people, and sides with his ways, and live out a faith that spurs you on to come, to die to self, and now go. That's why I used Rahab. Despite her harlot, lying behavior, when faced at a crossroad, she makes a change in her faith, a change in her ways, and an amazing legacy of prophets and kings come after her. The same be true for all of us. Despite what we did even this morning, being Mother's Day, some of us have already blown it this morning, there's a crossroad that stands before you right now. Will you leave a legacy that sides with God, sides with the church? Is the church the instrument of change that God has placed you in for change in your family? Do you side with God? Do you side with the church? And do you side with his ways? Do your children know God's word? Do they know about the character of him and the mighty things he does and wants to do? Will you side with God, the church, and his ways, forsaking yourself and others so that you too can come, die, and go? Strive to not leave a mere inheritance of silver, gold, recipes, and Christmas traditions, but a lasting legacy that says, by faith go I. It is possible, if you have Jesus Christ in your heart, to leave a lasting legacy, and also learning a thing or two about the character of Rahab. Amen?